Hello everyone, this is another episode of 10 for the Chairman. For those of you that haven't watched it before, this is where I take 10 questions from our subscribers and answer them as well as I can. And our subscribers are the part of our community that are contributing extra money every month to help us generate a lot of this community content that we do. So 10 for the Chairman, Wingman's Hangar, obviously the Jump Point magazine, and a lot of the sort of community content that we do on the website is really funded by the generous contributions of subscribers. So thank you all. And I thought would be fun at the top of this episode would be well, to invite David Haddock here, who is the lead writer and has been working with me on the universe in Star Citizen since the beginning, because I thought maybe it'd be fun to give you a bit more insight into sort of some of the thinking that we do in building the game. So, and we'll key it off the very first question we have on the 10 for the Chairman here, which Banjo asks, my favorite thing about Star Citizen is the tiny details that show you have obviously put a lot of thought into the game's world. What would surprise us the most to hear that you had planned in advance? So I thought that was a good question to segue into kind of a little aside that we'll do here in 10 for the Chairman. But yes, we put a vast amount of thought into the world and how we built it. I think in general, I've talked in the past about how when me and Dave were brainstorming the world of Star Citizen, we were trying to think about historical analogs for it, and we settled on sort of Roman times, the sort of decline and fall of the Roman Empire. But to give you another example, this is one that I actually think is quite neat. We have a book here. Go on, Dave. You want to talk about
this
kind
is
of
actually,
what we're approaching?
Yeah, this is a huge book, History of Architecture. Very, very big. Features a lot of nice line-drawn images. But yeah, we basically Chris had an idea a few weeks ago, actually before the summit, about putting more thought into the sort of the planet-side architecture. So when you go to a city, if you go to a city in Europe, for example, you're seeing a clash of a bunch of different eras of architecture, modern beside, architecture from 500 years ago and stuff like that. And so we wanted to have that feeling, so it didn't just feel like we kind of, built these planet-side locations in one fell swoop and they just sort of exist in one time. So
yeah, and I would say that, like, for me, kind of one of the big issues in a lot of science fiction games, even movies, I see is that it's all sort of created by the artist at the time, so he sort of does it as one sort of unified idea of a city or of a building. And the problem for me is basically that's not the way the real world works. I mean, even in a American city, which a lot of the cities around here aren't much older than 100 years or 200 years old, there's a vast amount of architecture difference even from 20 years ago. I mean, what the style of buildings built in the 50s is very different than in the 60s, than in the 70s, than in the 80s and the 90s, and now we're sort of into the 21st century. And you can even, just if I go and look at a house built in the 90s, I'm like, this right. Doesn't look so as cool as I thought. And that's only 10 or 20 years. And so if you look at cities that have been around for 500, 1,000 years, you can definitely feel that they're built up over time, and there's lots of different parts of the city that sort of have very distinct architectural styles. And so, I guess one of the things that was always bugging me when I was looking at some of our concept was like, well, it just sort of feels too unified. Like an architect came in and just designed the whole city. And outside of, say, Paris, where Napoleon III basically raised the middle of the city and had one architect essentially template it out, that doesn't really happen very often. And so kind of the idea that we wanted to do was come up with a way that we can sort of have our, depending on, like, Earth would have a very different feel than, say, Terra, which was newer, but Terra is still pretty developed compared to, say, an outpost. And so so from that we sort of discussed about, okay, well, we need different architecture styles and times. And so Behavior, who's also working on doing the planet side stuff, started to throw ideas out with Dave here, and we sort of were kicking it around. So yeah, we thought, do you want to, this is a pretty awesome document where basically each century since today through where the game starts.
And it's it's also at the same time it becomes a tricky thing because you don't want to make it too customized because otherwise we'll never get done. So basically what we did was we worked out, Dave Richard from Behavior sort of worked out a series of progressions of architectural styles throughout the millennium. So we basically kind of worked out a fictional document where we went from basically through each century talking about what major events happened, and how could that drive the architectural movements, and start some and end others, and how did the discovery of the Banu affect the architecture? Did it not? The Messer era, how did that affect architecture, stuff like that. So we started basically putting together this what turned into a somewhat sprawling document of basically the history of human architecture for the next 1,000 years, using references and photos and stuff like that to kind of help the artists plot these sort of different visual cues throughout the landscape to kind of mess with the cities, so they look a little bit more lived in and a little bit more unique.
I mean, what were they? What were the different? Do we have our names for them, or we have?
Yeah, we have a handful. Colonial style, which is sort of
right.
After the terraforming of Mars, everyone became infatuated with sort of prefabricated colonial thing. My personal favorite is chrysalistic aesthetics, which was some guy who was obsessed with cocoons. So it was all these sort of weird cocoon.
The retro primitive movement.
Oh yeah, retro primitive. People thinking we were advancing too far, so they were going for a more homegrown lifestyle.
And then the 24th century is Asharianism.
Asharianism, yeah, that was a movement that was dedicated to, since we were terraforming planets, we had an obligation to sort of build in accordance with the planet, not necessarily just wherever we wanted to do. So it was more about planetary development and planning, which is what Terra ended up adopting, hence why they're sort of built more in harmony with their environment rather than some of the other ones.
And the 25th century, I guess, the predominant style is colonial style, sort of coming back to colonial.
Yeah.
And Banu hybridism,
yeah,
which I guess would be taking parts of the Banu
yeah.
architecture. And then the sub-movement is exo-Gothic. What's
exo-Gothic. It was sort of exalting humanity's achievements, but in a new kind of futuristic type spin on it, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then 26th century has Henoism and Metaclassicism.
Yeah. Henoism, due to the Tavaran War and the expansions and the sort of fringe things, it was a kind of defensive aesthetic to, people were afraid of being attacked, so there was much more of kind of probably reinforced walls, slimmer windows, all that type of stuff. Metaclassicism is more of like kind of the classic kind of Rome architecture, columns and
and then I think 27th century we got to monumentalism, exaltation, which I guess would be the peak of the Messer area.
Yeah.
And so that would be, I guess, kind of like Rome at its height, right?
Right.
You're building these huge colosseums, monuments.
Exactly, and that sort of World War II German type, Fritz-Lang metropolis type stuff.
Right. Cool. And then 28th century is Meta Baroque. And the sub-movement is revolutionary art.
It was sort of the Messer of that time. I think we were sort of playing with the idea that he wanted to make the people feel small. If exaltation is sort of humanity at its height, this was more of a Baroque thing, so it was wanted to make the people feel insignificant. So sort of huge vaulted ceilings, also anything that would make you feel like in awe of what you're a part of, basically.
And what's revolutionary art?
That was a sort of subculture that was beginning to rise up against the Messer era. So it's like graffiti, anything that would kind of incite them, antagonize them, type of thing.
And then we get to
and then they go down.
29th century, so predominant styles Ultra Deco and organic architecture, and the sub-movement is Jean fusion.
Yeah, so sort of
Jean fusion. I've been corrected on the forums that I'm not pronouncing Jean correctly. Or Shan correctly, I guess it was, is more the Chinese pronunciation. But they're not really Chinese, they're actually from a different part of the galaxy.
Yeah. But yeah, so, after all these sort of hundreds of years of, oppression, basically it was sort of an explosion of creativity. So everyone was trying to do these sort of unique shapes and, glass. And of course the Xi'an was sort of the Cold War, so of course they're going to embrace, their design aesthetics and stuff like that.
And then we get to now, which is where the game's set, which is Meta Bauhaus, which I guess is the supermodernism. And then what's biomimicry?
It's sort of a very weird kind of sweeping shapes. It's sort of almost kind of like organic architecture type things, like these sort of very strange structures. It's kind of tough to describe. It was a very involved wiki search
to get that.
Trying to find.
So there you are. So that is the kind of thought that goes into building this universe and world. I think that answers the first question. And there's probably plenty of other things that would surprise you to be planned in advance, but I would definitely think probably no one would think that would be deep diving that far in terms of planning out the architecture. All right, so that was a rather long aside for question one, so I'll be much quicker on these next ones. So Armand Hammer asks, I know you have said in the past that the Idris is not really meant to be a ship that is played solo. However, I'm still guessing that you'll be able to fly it solo if you wanted. Is this true? Honestly, haven't made my mind up because there are certain ships that I feel like you need to play with other players to man correctly. Things like the Constellation, the Freelancer, you don't have to. You can hire either NPC crew and do it yourself. I haven't made the decision on the Corvette because it's definitely on the, it's sort of on that cusp. Anything bigger than a Corvette, I think you're definitely going to have at least several other players to play it with you. Potentially the Corvette, maybe you could have some NPCs. But I'm sort of leaning towards sort of making that more of a multi-crew ship that you invite some of your friends to fly with you, but full decision isn't made on that one, so kind of still up in the air. All right, next question comes from OB Locke. Will the Origin 890 Jump, RSI Orion, Aegis Survivor, and Volcaric, Miss Cull Sea, and the Drake Herald become available as single ship pledge packages before release? That's a good question, and again, we haven't fully decided what we're going to do there, but I'm willing to say that quite a few of those probably will be available before the game comes out. Definitely the 890 Jump, and then the other ones, the ones that all you guys actually voted for, probably. I mean, they really just have to be in the pipeline. So we're just getting going on sort of designing on the concept stage, and then obviously got a model, but we're still. Haven't hit the concept stage on a bunch of these ones because we've got a huge backlog of ships to do. I think there's over 50 different ships that we have to do at the moment. All right, next question comes from Krell, who asks, will a convoy made primarily of haulers ever be able to legitimately defend itself against a raiding party of fighters? Does CIG perhaps have some cunning game mechanics in mind that will help us ensure a reasonable balance of power? Well, I mean, I would think if you're hauling a bunch of cargo and you've got well defended or well armored sort of cargo ships, and perhaps you've hired some mercenaries or some friends of yours to fly escort with you, you should be able to defend yourself against a raiding party of fighters. I mean, if you're flying completely unarmed cargo freighters and that's it, and there's fighters, then obviously you won't be able to. But I mean, we're designing most of the ships to have weaponry, so like the Freelancer is a pretty well armed sort of cargo ship. Maybe the Starfarer isn't as maneuverable as something like a Freelancer will be, but it's certainly going to have guns and turrets, and you probably, if you're taking a Starfarer and taking a whole bunch of goods somewhere, you'll probably hire a few people to fly escort for you. So that's kind of how you'd have to approach that, which you can hire NPCs, or you can have your friends help you, or hire other players. So I'm hoping that will ensure a reasonable balance of power. And then, of course, if you're trading in sort of the safe areas, the regulated areas, then there are like significant penalties for people trying to attack you and raid you, and so you're likely to be fairly safe, say, trading inside the core UEE worlds, but as you get further out, you'll be less safe. Okay, next question comes from Shiamen Ryusaka, we probably mispronounced, who writes, is it possible to have modules which allow the transfer shield in cost of your own capacitor to another, or even remotely repair someone's whole armor? All right, so I'm guessing that Shiamen Ryusaka's first language isn't English, but my guess at the question is, can I take my shield, or the energy, or the capacitor, the shield, and transfer it to someone else to either, I guess, protect them or repair their whole armor? And I would, if that was the question, I would say that no, it's not possible for you to sort of take your shield and transfer it somewhere else, or to help repair other people. You can definitely, on your own shield, manage energy to it and power to it, so you can have more power go to the front shields or the back shields, and if one of your segments is failing, you can maybe pump more power to it, because basically the regeneration rate of a shield is based on the amount of power that's pumped to it. And so you can manage that, and we have a whole interface in the HUD for that. Next question comes from Smart Ace, who asks, will there be different types of jump points in the persistent universe? Example, one-way jump points, collapsing jump points that larger ships can't use, jump points that require special equipment to use after they're discovered, etc. So I would say, yes, there will be different jump points. Dave, I mean, let's see. I think we've discussed this, but we haven't really designed fully the mechanics on this, right?
Right.
We've talked about potentially having some jump points that only some smaller ships could
Right. And
path, or maybe it's you have to you've got to fly it with a small ship, and then a bigger ship has to fly it. And it's a different route.
Right. And the recently unlocked or the proposed stretch goal one was the human one that with a jump point collapsed, but we don't know if that's going to be sort of a persistent thing or.
Right. Well, I mean, there'll definitely be jump points that will go from one system to another system, and you can't be able to come back.
Right.
So you always have to find the entrance and so it's not necessarily, there could be one-way jump points and there could be two-way jump points.
Right.
And there will definitely be collapsing jump points. It's just more about the jump points that larger ships can't use. We haven't 100%.
Right.
We've had that discussion because we were talking about it in the Squadron 42 story where there's going to be parts in Squadron 42 where we're actually going to chart a jump point and go into uncharted territory, and we were debating about, do you go through with the
Can a carrier follow you?
The carrier, yeah. Can the carrier follow you, or do you chart the jump point just in the fighter? So we
Right.
haven't fully figured that out, but there will definitely be different parts. So they are got a tiny little bit of info on Squadron 42 too. Okay, so next question comes from Scurry Panda, who asks, what kind of peripheral support can we expect to see in the first iteration of the dogfight module? Specifically, are there plans to integrate Trek IR into the first version? Okay, so Trek IR probably will not be on the first release of the dogfight module, but Oculus Rift may be, but that's sort of dependent on Crytek, because they're doing some work to fix some of the lag issues we have when we have an implementation of it and we're using it, but it's a bit too laggy to be useful. If they fix those implementations, then there will be a certain level of Oculus Rift, but that would be a sort of later focus, because right now we really just want to get the dogfighting V1 out so everyone can use it, but I want to get the Rift running as soon as possible, and then obviously right after that will be Track IR, but probably not from Dogfight V1, possibly for the Rift though. Okay, next question comes from Nicro, who asks, myself and a few of my mates are planning on being bounty hunting as our main job in the Pacific universe. Can you clarify if there will be an official bounty system, and if so, how will it work? Okay, so yes, there will definitely be an official bounty system. Do you want to add anything? I mean, I could throw out what, my understanding or thought of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've read some of the design documents that Rob and Nate have written up, but I'm not as.
You're on the spot.
Yeah.
Basically on the bounty hunting, there will be an official list of bounties. I mean, it'll be like whatever you like, the FBI most wanted list or whatever you would have, the United Nations most wanted list, and those will appear. We're planning to have sort of a mission board that will be per system, and sort of it's where you would go to look for work, and that mission board would have different subcategories. So, if you're a trader and you're just basically a trucker, and you're like, okay, I want to haul cargo, you can go there, and there'll be jobs for you to either, just take cargo that you're getting paid for a run from here to here. There'll be jobs for you to fly someone else's ship, and the same goes on bounty hunting. Like if you're a bounty hunter, you'll go there, and it'll be like seeing the posted bounties, which is kind of what happens in America for bounties. Is there's posted, the FBI or the local police will have bounties out to bring in various people on the run, and so there will be sort of a global bounty hunting system that there will be benefits for, and it won't be just going after people in space. There'll be some tracking that you can will do down on the planet side. So it should be pretty cool. But yeah, there will be definitely an official bounty system. Okay, so next question comes from Faye Yunus Kedar. I'm sure I butchered that too. Are you reworking the constellation like you did the Avenger? So the answer is yes, we are reworking the constellation like you did the Avenger. We are doing some design modifications to make loading and unloading cargo much easier to maximize the cargo space, and also not have it conflict with the entrance and launching of the Merlin. And we're also considering moving the living quarters to the front, nearby where the piloting section is, so the back is just cargo and the engine room, which I think there were a fair number of threads about that quite a while ago. So that's in the works, as well as some variants. So it'll take a bit of time, but it should be very cool. Next question comes from Jay Renier, who asks, could you explain how EVA, in brackets extra vehicular activity, will work in the game? Will we be able to repair damage to our ships or explore wrecks, etc.? So yes, you will be able to repair damage to your ship, and you'll be able to explore wrecks. So we're going to have EVA in the game. Pretty much most of the ships have sort of airlocks that will allow you to go to the outside. Some of the ships, like the Hornet, doesn't really have that. It would have to open the canopy, you'd have to vent the space, and then you'd have to detach yourself from the seat. But yeah, we have full sort of zero-G plan for movement. So if you have a sort of an EVA suit, it'll have little thrusters on it for you to move around. You'll also be able to grab hold of side of things. So if you think of like the movie Gravity, so that's all stuff actually that is on the team that's working on the sort of first-person boarding. Is they've got that sort of zero-G combat EVA stuff on their plate, and we're focusing on simulating that correctly. And the idea would be that you would use that to go outside to potentially board other ships, or potentially go out and sort of do some patch-up repairs. You'll never be able to properly repair your ship. You'd have to do that down on the planet. But just to get you going, those are all things that you'd do. And I definitely think there could be a case where you would like sort of EVA into a space wreck, which is essentially kind of a boarding mission. So yeah, and it should be really cool. All right, there we go. So that is the end of this episode of 10 for the Chairman. Probably a little longer than normal, but hopefully you enjoyed the insight into the architecture, sort of thought we've had behind how the cities would develop and the places would, and the other questions you found hopefully illuminating. And I will see you next week. Thank you very much.